Hi, this is Paul. Welcome on the third research and development video update. If this is your first time here, please subscribe to my channel right now and give like if you will see the video interesting. And I'm sure it will be interesting because today I will show new progress in development of new Gene 2.1 lottery software update. Last time I presented the rating by probability and revealed the probability formula that is also very complex and difficult. And I pointed out the problem with this formula because it will reduce the speed of the gene significantly, and this is something we don't want to expect, and I don't want to have it at all. So my aim was to figure it out and how to avoid this problem. And the good news is that I found the solution, and here I will show how I did it. So today we have the Gene 2.0 and we click the start. After the start, the fields are created and final setting is done. This is something you are not aware at all, but it should be done that the input boxes, the input box and the values from input box are loaded into the operational memory, and also the values from the filter box. And then the loop is started, so the infinite loop is running in a circle where the random numbers are generated, then are evaluated, and the best results are printed. And now I added the calculations for rating, and this is something which will slow the process, mainly in case we will use the rating by probability. And now see how the rating will work in the gene. So we have the rating calculation procedure. We select the method, and we can select from the 6 available methods I presented in the first video update for the research and development. And based on the method, the value should be calculated. So we have a matrix when on one side we have possible number of hits in the first draw, and there is a possible number of hits in the second draw, and it can differ for every lottery depending how many hits you can actually have in the first and second draw. You have also lotteries only with one draw and so on. So what it means, then if we have, for example, 2 hits and 1 hit in the second draw, then the value should be calculated, and it should be calculated every time. And it means that if we have in average 15,000 cycles per second, then it should do about 3,000 calculations in the same loop or per second. And unfortunately, it will slow down the whole generation significantly, and this is something I would like to avoid. And as I mentioned, I found the solution. But before this I will reveal it, let me summarize or compare the 6 methods we can select. So the first one is something we have already today. So the value for this method is equal to the number of hits. So as we have 1 hit in the first draw and 1 hit in the second draw, the value is 1 plus 1 is 2. The same, we have 0 hits and 2 hits is here. So we have the value is really equal to the number of hits. In the second method, x squared, the value is higher. For example, for 1 and 1 is the number of hits is 2, but 2 on 2 is 4, and 3 plus 2 is 5, and 5 on 2 is 25. With other method, as it's exponential e on x, we are giving even more value. Then we have the factorial, which is harder, and there is also even more value. Now it looks that it's a little bit smaller than using the exponential, but when we have more hits, the the factorial will give you much more value than the exponential, so that's why it's harder. So this one is softer, it's more harder, and so on, so the hardness is increasing. Then we have x on x, where we are getting more and more value. For example, for 5 hits we have more than 3000 the value. And finally is the method using the probability, and here we are distinguishing between the hits in the first draw and the second draw. In our case, we are calculating the value from the lottery, where we are selecting 3 numbers from 20 balls in the first draw and 2 numbers from 10 balls in the second draw. And you can see that every combination has eventually it has different value. For example, if we have 1 hit and 1 hit in the second draw, in the first draw the value is 7.8, but if we have 2 hits and 0 hits, then it's 75, and the other scenario, 2 hits in the first draw and 0 hits, is 36. So it means that every situation has really different value, and this is something what we are considering in this method, and none of these 5 methods can do it. These 5 methods has always the value is equal to the sum of hits for the first and second draw. So if you see like here, we have 2 hits and 0 hits is 4, or 1 and 1 is 4, or 0 and 2 is 4. The same is with 3 hits and so on with 4 hits. So you can see that the values are repeated in these 5 methods, but not here in the probability. In some cases it can have the same values, but mostly it is really different. Also, the probability is giving us much more or maximum value we can from all these 6 methods we have. In our case here we have, for example, value for 5 hits we have more than 51,000. So if we compare it with 5, 25, 3,000 and 51,000. So there is the comparison between the selected rating methods. And now let me show you how I fix the problem to not to slow the generation. So I simply move the rating calculations into the field creation. So we select the method, in our case the probability, and the values are calculated in advance, because we know that we already know the maximum amount of possible hits for the first draw and for the second draw. We also know other values like number of balls in the drawing machines and the number of selected balls. So based on this we can calculate the whole matrix, and we know it will not change during the generation. So that's why I was able to move it to the static part of the generation. And then I added a new procedure called picking, and it's very simple. The picking works then when we are generating the numbers, we are getting also the number of hits in the first and second draw, and we simply, based on this number of hits, we just simply select and we pick the value without need to calculate it. So we are keeping the same speed, as we have the average speed about 15,000 cycles per second. Then there is 0 calculations. It means that we are keeping the same speed of the generation like we have today in the Gene 2.0. So this is really good for me and also for you, and I'm glad that I didn't need to give up the rating by probability, and that I can keep the Gene really fast as it's today. Now let me show a new shape of the interface of the software Gene 2.1. So the first thing what I changed is the logo. It was the most difficult thing. Just kidding, yeah? But we have here the Gene 2.1. Then what was added was the rating combo box that is between the game combo box and the modes where we can select it. So it's you can make the settings in the logical order from the left to the right, like we are doing today. So you have the language, skin, and game. So these three combo boxes were shrinked. Then there is the new one, this is the rating, and then the modes like we know them today. So when I activate it, I can select the language, skin, game, then I select the rating where I have these 6 methods like we have today, just the value of number of hits, then it's just the x, then is x on 2, then the exponential of x, then factorial on x, and x on x, and finally the probability from the first and second draw. So we can select, for example, rating by factorial. Then let me jump in a little bit into the code. And one of the modifications I have to do is to change the sum of hits we can get during the generation. So in the Gene 2.0 it works that we are assuming it using variable w5, and this we used for the first draw by the same variable we used also for the second draw. So there was no chance to distinguish between the hits in the first and second draw. So what I changed, I deactivated the summing in the second draw and added new variable which is called w5b, and this is used to sum just hit only for the second draw. And that's what I can do here, that we have for hits for the second draw, for the first draw, and for the second draw. The number of hits can be also 0, so we can have 3, 0, and depending on the kind of lottery you select. So that's the first major modification. And the second one is that there we have a new procedure called rating, and the rating is actually the rating calculation, like it was moved to the field creation like we have here. And at first we will create the two-dimensional field, or I can call it matrix, and it has the size according to the possible amount of hits or maximum amount of hits for the first draw and for the second draw. Then based on the selected method we selected in the combo box, we will calculate the value relevant for every combination. So we have these 6 methods here. The first is x, so the value is equal to value to the number of hits from the first and second draw. Then there is the second method, but it's marked by 1 because we are starting from 0. So the second method is x squared, so it's x multiplied by x, or the number of hits multiplied by my number of hits. Then there is an exponential from number of hits. Then we have the factorial from number of hits, I mean the sum from the first and second draw, and that's x on x, so it's simply the number of hits is powered by number of hits. And finally we are getting the value by probability, so we are using the probability formula that I revealed in the previous research and development video update, where you can see the whole formula on paper, and also you can see it how it is calculated. So you see the formula is really very long. It has many operators, many arguments, and brackets as well. The good thing is that it really works, and I will use it only once before the loop is started, so all the calculation is done here, and then we are running the generation in, let's say, infinite loop until you will stop it by yourself. So this was briefly about the code. As I shown, here is the new interface. You can select the methods, and that's all the update and progress in the development of this Gene 2.1 update. There is a lot of detailed work behind, but I highlighted and shown the most important and interesting stuff that will be also interesting for you. So thank you for watching and your attention. If you missed something, just replay it. If you are new here, please subscribe to my channel right now. Provide your feedback, comments, and every like will be nice from you. Also join us on the Facebook page, groups, follow the links in the description, and see you next time on the 4th research and development video update. In the meantime, I will release a few new video tutorials and some live stream, so stay tuned and have a good time.